Mobile Manga Podcast, where we go behind the scenes in the cheese world to chat with the people making, selling, or distributing your favorite specialty food products. I'm your host, Janae Muha, certified cheese professional, longtime cheesemonger, and producer advocate. Sarah Hoffman firmly believes in serendipity, and from the story of Green Dirt Farm, it's for good reason. Things just seem to have lined up perfectly for the life she has now, making sustainable sheep milk cheese in Missouri. It's not a path that many are led to. Sheep milk cheese is not an easy task to take on, since sheep dairying is relatively new in the United States. Sarah gives us a rundown of what took us so long and why we aren't even really close to more U.S.-produced sheep milk cheese. I love getting the opportunity to learn something new from the people I talk to, and I left this conversation more knowledgeable than I went in. I hope you get the same outcome.
Yeah, well, hi everybody. I'm Sarah Hoffman. I own and operate Green Dirt Farm, which is a small artisan cheese company in Northwest Missouri. We started as a sheep dairy and cheese making business back in 2008. And, things grew and we're really loving what we were doing and making some really fantastic cheese. But discovered that economic conditions made it really tough for us to be economically sustainable. And so knowing that we really needed to, obviously, to be there if we were going to have any longevity in the business, we then sought out some other dairies that could help us grow. So we source sheep milk from other dairies as well as our own. And we also, more recently, in the last 5 years, have begun to source some really lovely Jersey cow's milk from a local dairy. And we're making some blended milk cheeses too, to help us get to that sort of elusive business goal of economic sustainability.
The very elusive, especially when talking about sheep milk.
Yes, exactly.
So I had the opportunity to visit and it was wonderful. And it was so great to see the sheep. I would just love for you to talk a little bit more about the premise behind Green Dirt and sustainability and all of those things that are kind of the core of your business.
Sure. So when I started the business, I actually started the business in 2002, but I didn't know how to milk sheep and I didn't know how to make cheese. So then that's the reason why it took us until 2008 to actually become a licensed cheesemaker. But I started the business with the desire to create an environmentally sustainable small dairy on our farm in Northwest Missouri. And so that was really the heart of the business was and the foundation was the goal to be environmentally sustainable. And that's the reason we call ourselves Green Dirt, is that we know that our soil is the foundation for everything that happens on the farm. And so we really focus on making sure that what we're doing with our soil is as sustainable as possible and as environmentally friendly as possible. Supporting, ecological diversity on our farm is super important. We even have a role of a biodiversity manager on the farm who has a background in conservation biology and, helps us to create plans that will sustain our farm and help us to grow in an environmentally responsible way. So we started with that premise that we wanted to find the most environmentally sustainable way to do dairying and to create artisan cheeses. But at the same time, we also wanted to create really fantastic cheese. I'm lucky in that I have a background in an undergraduate degree in chemistry, and that is a really good scientific foundation for cheese making. And I also have a background in medicine. I practiced internal medicine for 10 years and had an interest in infectious diseases. So, the microbiology was also a great underpinning and scientific foundation for cheese making, that knowledge. And then I also, coming at it from a different angle, have an aunt who was very formative for me growing up, and I was very close to, who owned her own cheese shop in the 70s, a gourmet cheese shop in New Jersey. And when I was in college, I would go there and, help her put together her catering boards and help her sell cheese. And she really taught me all about good cheese, at an unusual time in the US when it was really hard to find good cheese. Of course, most of the cheese that she had in her shop was European. But when I was in medical school in San Francisco, she would come out and go to the fancy food show and take me along with her every year. And I just look forward to that so much. So that was really kind of a real inspiration for me in growing up and learning about cheese. And I think it's, even though I don't have this conscious recognition that that there was any sort of stepwise progression towards becoming a cheesemaker, I realized that all of those things influenced why I eventually became a cheesemaker and why I love doing it so much.
Sounds like a perfect storm to me, really.
Yeah. There's an alignment. We like to say how much we love serendipity on the farm, because so many things happen on the farm through serendipity, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. So the other farms that you work with, do they have the same level of sustainability? Are you working specifically with other companies that are in alignment with what you guys are doing?
Well, that's a real challenge for us, is finding milk suppliers who uphold our same values. And we've been fortunate that so far they have. And it is still challenging, though. We're still looking for more dairies to help us grow who have the same values that we do. So all of our partner farmers presently get the same certification that we do, that sort of validates our sustainable practices. That is a animal welfare approved certification from the organization A Greener World. And their certification is terrific. I like to say, for people who ask me, I frequently get asked, why aren't we organic? And I like to say that I think that the animal welfare approved certification is actually better than organic in my mind, because the organic certification doesn't have very strong animal welfare requirements. But A Greener World's animal welfare approved certification has strong animal welfare guidelines, and also or requirements, actually, not just guidelines. We're required to follow very strict standards for animal welfare, but they also have environmental standards that we have to follow.
Yeah, that's a conversation behind the counter that is had pretty regularly too, of like, well, this company's not organic. Yeah, but they still do a lot of like better, if not, so. Well, and considering that you're looking for other farms, sheep milk also is just hard to come by in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about sheep dairying in the United States?
Yeah, well, sheep dairying is a very fledgling industry in the United States. The first dairy sheep in the United States were imported in the early 90s. And so that's not that long ago for an industry to get started. And unfortunately, very soon after the first few dairy sheep were imported, all importations of further animals was shut down because of diseases in Europe. And that was not opened up until, just about 5 years ago or so. We're very fortunate. And so what that did was, for the dairy sheep industry, it made it really difficult for us to improve the production of our dairy sheep and get them up to a standard that is more sustainable, like the European dairy sheep. And so it's only been recently that we've been able to bring in new genetics and start building our genetic potential up to something that could possibly be more economically sustainable for the dairy sheep industry. So because of that, there are very few sheep dairies in the United States, primarily because it's just very, very hard going from an economic perspective. And so there are probably fewer than I think I saw a statistic recently that said there are fewer than 100 sheep dairies in the US. And probably fewer than 10 of us are actually doing our own processing on the farm, like we do at Green Dirt. But it's all because people are interested and people want to milk sheep and create those beautiful cheeses that sheep milk makes, and yogurt. But the economics make it very challenging, and almost impossible.
Yeah. So hopefully in a couple of years, when we start to see more of those genetics kind of coming through and bigger production, then hopefully that will even itself out a little bit. But
exactly, yeah. we're all hoping for that and working towards that.
Do you also think that this is just a thought process that I have around sheep, just because of I'm not a farmer. I've only visited farms, but every time I go visit, it's like cows are usually like a little timid, but still want to come and say hi. Goats are just up in your business always. And sheep are always just kind of like, not so much. So do you think that maybe temperament has a little bit to do with why there weren't very many like sheep dairies until the 90s?
No, actually, I don't think that's true at all. I think temperament with dairy sheep is something that is a positive benefit. While I would say sheep in general are very hypervigilant and predator aware, and that makes them a little standoffish with strangers. They also have remarkable facial recognition for people and know people. So I can walk in amongst our sheep without them being too terribly dismayed and frightened, but a new person can't do that. And that's one of the reasons why we don't allow strangers to come in during our milking process. It's too stressful for them. But I actually think that the main reason, again, is the reason that we don't have dairy sheep in the US is economic. I think that dairying in general in the US was really started as a commodity and business proposition from the get-go. We didn't ever have a cottage cheese making industry. Like, I don't mean cottage cheese, I mean a cottage industry making cheese like they did in Europe. And we never had those kind of ancient traditions that were handed down from generation to generation. And so cheese making, when it did start in the United States, was all about business. It was all about making cheese and making it at scale. And the cow is the animal that's best suited to that. And it wasn't until even the 70s when people started seeing these cheeses from Europe and saying, hey, there are these fantastic tasting cheeses over in Europe. Why don't we have these here in the US? That anybody started to think about even goat cheese, for example. And it wasn't until even later than that people began to say, hey, what about the sheep milk cheeses of Europe? Those traditional and very beloved cheeses from Europe that are made with sheep milk. Why don't we have any of those here? And that's when I think the artisan cheese movement really had an impact on the variety of cheeses that we make here in the US.
See, this is why I talk to the people who know, because like my experiences out on the farms are very different from people who are doing it every day. Because to me, every time I go out to a sheep farm, they're always like, the sheep are like, no, I don't know you, lady. Like, stay away. I don't know who you are. And that's fine. I can respect that. But it's very different than when you go to a goat farm and they just want to be up in your business and see who you are. So.
Well, I have a really interesting perspective on sheep, because I have experience with probably the most domesticated sheep breeds, which are the dairy sheep, because they get handled so much. and the least domesticated of the sheep breeds in the US. So when we started in 2002, I started with the not brilliant idea of crossbreeding dairy sheep with a landrace breed in the US called the Gulf Coast Native. And I thought, well, this is a great idea because the Gulf Coast Native is so hardy and so disease resistant, and they're one of only two breeds of sheep in the world that are known to be parasite resistant. And so I thought, well, I'll just crossbreed them. And that turned out to be a completely kooky idea, as many of mine have been, because the Gulf Coast sheep is basically a feral sheep. It's a fascinating breed. It was released by Spanish conquistadors off the coast of Florida and Louisiana and all along the Gulf Coast, and let just go wild in the pine barrens. And over the course of 300 years, they became more feral, and that's how they became parasite resistant too. It was very much, survival of the fittest. And little did I know, it is foolhardy to try to milk a wild sheep, and those sheep, they're small and compact and really tough, and I swear they can fly. They can like sail over any fence, and they'll jump right into you to get away from you. It's like, I had it demonstrated quite often that it was crazy to try to milk a feral sheep.
Yeah, well, I mean, feral sheep are good at getting away from things, so I guess.
Yes. They are very hardy, I can say that. But compared to a Gulf Coast sheep, dairy sheep are incredibly tame. They're very, very easy to handle, and very willing to let people they know approach them.
So that was at the beginning. How many years did you do that, or try to do that?
I did that for about 4 years before I completely gave up on it.
You're like, I can't do this anymore.
This is a really bad idea.
Well, we all have to learn a lesson somehow, I guess.
Believe me, if starting a business like this, I learned lots and lots of lessons.
I'm sure. So Green Dirt has the farm, and then you guys also have a cafe in town. Can you talk about the cafe a little bit?
Yeah. So in 2016, I knew that we needed to grow because we were having space issues out at the farm, and we didn't have adequate room to do our delivery for our e-commerce and do our shipping. And I had been looking for a place where we could expand to, and it just happened that this building became available, and that's very near the little historic tourist town that our farm is nearby. So it's about 4 miles away from the farm. The building was originally built to be a winery, so it was really pretty well set up. It had a very huge and nice basement that was meant for wine production, and we do all of our orders and fulfillment out of that basement. And then we have a shop upstairs in the front, which was originally just going to be like just a little grocery kind of cheese shop, and we share the space with a local winery that's making really fascinating wines with North American indigenous grapes. And so we were just going to be a little kind of touristy grocery store, but we found that our menu items were really what people wanted. And we began to sell sandwiches and cheese and charcuterie boards. And that's really what took off and what customers showed us they wanted. So now we're a kind of a full-scale cafe selling sandwiches and cheese and charcuterie boards, all of those things featuring our own cheese, but also other local small batch food makers, local and regional small batch food makers who make charcuterie and jams and jellies and natural ferments and chocolate and honey and um, pickles, all kinds of fun foods.
I went, it was awesome. And the board was amazing. And I could see so many people just being like really interested to go be like, I'm going to go get a glass of wine and a cheese board. Like I could see that being like ideal for that area.
Yeah, perfect combination.
Yeah.
More serendipity.
Gotta love it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the last 2 years and how
Yes.
COVID has affected your business.
Well, actually, when COVID first happened, I was devastated and thought this is for sure going to be the end, because how are we going to survive this? You know, shutting down what is basically the economic engine of our business was our little cafe, and also a lot of our cheese is sold to food service, and so lots of restaurants were closing down, and our orders plummeted, and we were shut down for a month and a half in the cafe. But I had so many people working for me that I felt a very strong sense that I needed to be there for them and make sure that they were able to get through it. And our cheesemakers came and lived on the farm because during our lockdown here, and that was fantastic. Their willingness to keep going and to stick with it was also a fabulous thing. And once we got through the initial lockdown, we found, and we were able to open up again, we found that our shop was positioned really, really well because we had so much outdoor eating space with picnic tables, more serendipity. Little did we know how much we were going to need that, but it became a place where people felt really comfortable coming, and we actually grew 30%. We had our loyal customers rallied around and purchased cheese online from us. And even though we lost a good deal of our restaurant customers, our other wholesale customers in grocery stores picked up. So we ended up actually growing during 2020, which was a tremendous surprise. We did not expect that. And it was a great thing for us.
That's great to hear. It's so nice to hear it. I was having these conversations right as lockdown kind of started happening, and people were in that mode of like, oh my gosh, I'm freaking out about this because, 70% of our sales is gone almost overnight.
Yeah.
And it's so much better to talk to people now, like with a little bit of hindsight of kind of like how that is specifically right at the beginning, with a little bit of hindsight in that moment of like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing to ever happen. And now to see people doing pretty well.
Yeah. I don't want to say, that I feel good about the pandemic. That isn't what I meant.
Yeah.
But I feel good that we were able to hold it together, and our great team of employees stuck with us and stuck through the pandemic with us. And, I just am incredibly grateful for that.
Y'all make some pretty young cheeses. So was that an issue with you as the lockdown kind of first started? Like, were you guys able to kind of adjust your making schedule to harder cheeses, or how was that for you?
Yeah, well, so what really happened with that is that I'm trying to actually remember what happened with that.
It's getting so long ago now, almost.
We ended up calling some of our distributors and saying, we're sitting on a lot of extra stock. Can you take it? And some of them said yes, wonderfully, and said, yes, we'll sell this for you. So we moved through that, and then we began, as you suggested, to make the cheeses that we could stockpile. But it became pretty quickly apparent that we didn't need to slow down our cheese making last year. In fact, we didn't slow down our cheese making at all. We made more cheese, so that was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and especially as a farmstead producer, also, that milk kind of keeps coming, whether you like it or not. And if you have
Right.
contracts with other farms that you want to keep supporting them and making sure that they're getting rid of all of their milk too, because it just doesn't stop.
Yeah, that is so true.
So you already had like an e-commerce all set up with.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, that was another sort of revelation, which is that we've had e-commerce set up since I think 2010. And, we've gone through various iterations of trying to sell online, and, a variety of, trying a variety of tactics. And as of last year, I was sort of thinking, why are we doing this? It's not really working that well. And so I was almost, let's give it another year and see how it goes after, a lot of years of trying to make it work, because it's just very hard to compete with the big guys, in e-commerce. And so I thought it really wasn't a very successful business strategy for us. So I was thinking very seriously of pulling the plug on it, really. And then COVID hit, and it turned out to be a real lifesaver for us because, like I mentioned before, many of our very local and loyal customers sent care packages to their friends and family, and birthday gifts, and it was a wonderful way for us to reach out to the community and be part of the community, and get cheese and comforting and delicious goodies to our families and friends at that time. So and our e-commerce really took off and helped us a lot get through the pandemic.
It's all about that serendipity again. I think you were just
Serendipity.
really ahead of the curve on that one, and it worked out. So that's great.
Yeah.
When I was there, we were talking about some fun stuff kind of coming up for Green Dirt. Can you talk about anything that you're working on?
Yes. Well, we are hoping to bring our cafe concept down to Kansas City. We have so many customers who come up to the farm, and we do events on our farm too. We do dinners and cheese tastings in an events barn on the farm. And so many of our customers who come to the cafe and come to our events, want to know, well, when are you gonna come down to Kansas City so that we can come and get cheese more often? And so we're hoping to bring the concept down to the East Crossroads next year sometime. Working hard on that.
Awesome. That's big stuff.
Yes. Yeah. I think it'll be really fun. We'll have a production space there, and customers can look into the aging room and the production space from the cafe. So I think it'll be a really fun thing for customers to come in, for our guests to see how the cheese is made.
Educational and interactive. We love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, here in Seattle, we have beachers where people can watch cheddar being made, and then they can go eat it. And it's, it's a draw. It's a huge draw.
Yeah. Well, that was a lot of my inspiration. When I've been in Seattle, I used to live in Seattle, actually. I did my internal medicine training at the University of Washington, and lived in Seattle for 7 years. And Beechers, and so I get back regularly, and Beechers was a real inspiration for us to have a way for people to see into our cheese making.
I feel like when you have lived in Seattle for any amount of time, you're always going to come back occasionally, because it's just, I don't know. I'm not from here. I grew up in Oregon, but it's one of the most beautiful cities I've ever been in. And every time when I'm driving down because I live on the north side, but every time when I'm driving into the city, I'm like, this is why I live here, because it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Well, whenever we come back to visit, we always try to come back during August, September, or October. And whenever we come back to visit, we're like, why'd we move?
Because the good months of being here, but
Right, right,
rainy
right.
season has already started here. So,
Yeah.
that's probably why.
Yes.
Okay, a few more questions for you. These are kind of my like speed round ish sort of
Okay.
questions. What's your current cheese crush?
Oh, well, I have quite a few, and but I will always come back to Red Hawk from Cowgirl Creamery. I absolutely adore that cheese. I also love Pashki Sir, which is a Croatian sheep's milk cheese, which is, I mean, just one of the best cheeses I've ever tasted in my life. And I was fortunate enough to take a cheese making class through the University of Wisconsin with a Croatian cheesemaker who taught us how it's made in Croatia, and that really inspired our prairie tome recipe. So that's my a cheese that I will always come back to. I love the thistle renneted cheeses of Spain and Portugal. Those are one of Azatao is, if I can get my hands on that, I love that cheese. What else is a cheese crush for me right now? Hmm. Well, our own cheeses, of course.
Well, of course. I don't know. I think you kind of nailed that question with like, do you have some deep crushes? I love that. I get a little starry eyed too. So I'm always like, I don't know which one. There's so many. It's hard to
Yeah,
choose.
that's right. What cheese don't I like?
What is your favorite pairing?
My favorite pairing. This is a really standard, like classic pairing, and it's kind of trite because everybody knows it and loves it, but it's really good. Is a good Stilton and port. I mean, so good. Or Stilton and sherry.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
I think that, the classics, there's a reason why they're classic.
Mm-hmm.
They're
Yeah.
just really good. So,
Yeah, I do love that. Um, I also, I also love our washed rind cheeses with champagne. That's a fantastic, especially our tuffet when it's in season with champagne. That's just a really good pairing.
nice.
Yeah.
Your best food memory.
Oh, my best food memory. So many. uh, one of my best food memories was when I was a kid. When I was growing up, my dad was in the Navy, so we moved like every couple of years. But we always lived on a small farmstead, and sometimes my dad actually had little farm businesses on the side. And so we always raised our own food and had lots of animals on the farm. And of course, that was naturally an inspiration for me to want to do this business. But one of my really formative memories is of going out into the garden and just picking vegetables off the vine raw and eating them right there. Like a tomato off the vine from your garden, there's nothing better than that. There really is nothing better than that. It's so delicious.
And
And
it's
I
still
remember,
warm from the sun and
oh
like,
yeah,
yeah.
right, exactly, and all that flavor. And I can remember when I became an adult and moved out of the house and no longer had access to that kind of flavor and that kind of experience, how disappointed I was in grocery store vegetables. I just, it wasn't the same. It really did inspire me to want to, live on a farm and grow all our own stuff like I did when I was a kid.
Yeah, it sounds like you were made for this life. So
Thank you very much for having me. It was lots of fun. And it was great to see you when you came out, and glad you stopped by.
yeah, I'm so happy I did too. And thank you so much for the hospitality. It was so nice to get a chance to connect and that was still like really early on in my trip. So it just felt very exciting. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's people and like cheese things happening. And I felt really good. And I just thank you for that.
Oh, well, thanks for stopping in. It was great to see you.
It was such an honor to get to visit the farm and get a first-hand tour of the facilities, and was presented with a gorgeous platter of Green Dirt's delicious treats. I'm excited to see the growth that's on the horizon for this hardworking crew. This podcast is recorded, produced, and edited by me, Janae Muha. Thank you to Ben Muha for allowing me to use your music. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow along on my cheesy adventures at Instagram and Facebook. I post full video recordings over on Patreon and would love to hear about topics or people you think need the spotlight. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep spreading the word of good curd.